Welcome to the MAHA Media Hub. Welcome to the MAHA Revolution. I'm Tony Lyons, president of MAHA Action. Let's start with a hard truth. Right now, American children are the sickest in the developed world. 1 in 5 is obese. Childhood cancer is up 40% since 1975. Half of all kids have at least one chronic disease, and roughly 70% of what they eat every day isn't even food. It's an ultra-processed food-like substance. These aren't opinions. These are facts on the ground. And this isn't an accident. This is a system functioning exactly as it was designed to function. Much of our food is engineered to hijack our biology and drive cravings, not health. Our healthcare system is built to manage profitable symptoms, completely ignoring the root causes. And the same industries getting rich off chronic disease are pulling the strings of the institutions supposed to protect us. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's a business model, and it ends right now. But to fix our bodies, we have to fix what we are allowed to say. Clean food and safe medicine are the foundation, but the engine of real change is the First Amendment. We all saw how fast those rights vanished. During the COVID era, debate was shut down, open inquiry, the lifeblood of true science was crushed by top-down authoritarian mandates. Many of you paid a massive price simply for asking real questions. When Secretary Kennedy stepped into the political arena, it was to fight that exact censorship. He saw what happens when establishment silences families. The MAHA movement exists to be the megaphone for every American who refuses to shut up and comply. Because a right you don't use is a right you eventually lose. You can't separate free speech from health. If you silence scientists, science just becomes whatever the people in power say it is. True science requires ruthless debate and the absolute freedom to follow the evidence wherever it leads. And today I have massive news. Less than 24 hours ago, MAHA won a colossal victory for free speech. In 2022, a coalition, including Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, sued the Biden administration in a case known as Murthy v. Missouri. The evidence was undeniable. The administration colluded with tech giants to silence Americans who called out Dr. Fauci's bad science and the tyranny of the COVID era. Yesterday we won, and the case was settled. A 10-year consent decree now legally prohibits federal agencies and the White House from ever enforcing or forcing companies like Meta, Google, and Microsoft, or anybody else to throttle our voices again. We owe a massive debt to Secretary Kennedy, who's been a relentless defender of free speech, and to President Trump, who ended this censorship in his first week in office. But we're just getting started. This movement is about standing up to intimidation. It's about choosing truth over compliance. Today, we stand with people who took the hits, people who spoke out and never backed down. Sayer G, Dr. Ben Tapper, Dr. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, Rizza Islam, and Erin Elizabeth Finn. The establishment branded them the Disinformation Dozen. They were deplatformed, smeared, and attacked from every angle. But they didn't cave. They held the line for medical freedom. And history will remember them as heroes. And today, they're here to tell their story. You know, there's a great line from one of my favorite books, The Old Man and the Sea, and it's, "A man can be destroyed, but never defeated." And none of these 12 were ever defeated. And now they're rising again to fight again, stronger than ever. And their fight is our fight. It's a choice between a system that profits from sickness and silence, or a new reality built on transparency, accountability, and actual health. We're also joined by relentless fighters like Senator Rand Paul, Stuart Brotman, Mary Holland, Gary Brecka, and Dr. Eric Berg. Please welcome our first guest. He's a proud member of the Disinformation Dozen, the chairman of the Global Wellness Forum, founder of Green Med Info, and one of the most unapologetic MAHA warriors living today. His name is Sayer G. Welcome.
Sorry about that. Hey, thank you so much for having us today, Tony. Thank you for making it possible for us to share a bit about our experience, because, we were experiencing what millions of Americans went through. So we weren't special in that regard, but they did attempt to make an example of us, which is a very old tactic where you might bring some people that spoke up against the crown or whatever authority, and you pillory them, or you make a spectacle about how bad they are, and you invoke a moral contagion. And essentially, that's what we experienced, having been, named in such a manner, along the likes of now Secretary Kennedy and other colleagues who couldn't be here today. It's really honorific, because all of us here and those who are also listening, we're fundamentally parents, we're dutiful citizens who would like to believe that our government is, thinking of our best interest. And now, thankfully, we have representation in the executive branch, for example, that really cares about making America healthy again and the health of our children. So that's where we were coming from, right? And we were just sharing often factual information, peer-reviewed research indicating that there are unintended adverse effects to any intervention. It could be a supplement, it could be a vaccine. It's the same principle. There was nothing radical about what we were saying. And what we saw to be deployed, though, was a very concerning attempt to equate freedom of speech with essentially a terrorist act, which later, as many of you track this, was actually the case, which is that we were a threat to the so-called cognitive infrastructure of our country. And so DHS defined dissent or having heterodox views as if it was terrorism. So that's why this situation that we're all in still, given that we have filed a lawsuit against the named parties that are still responsible for shutting down, all American voices, is that we're still in the fight of our lives for the Constitution that we hold so dearly. I can tell you that this experience really up-leveled me, because I feel it in every cell in my bones that I'm an American. I'm proud of the fact that we have the Constitution, that this piece of paper requires that every act we take vivifies it, with our life essence. It doesn't mean anything without it. And so if we don't win, this fight to restore our basic rights, I'm afraid for what, the world will be like for our children. And that's really why I think everyone on the call today that you've invited in can speak directly to why it was never really a choice. We were just really some of the loudest and first to warn the public about what we saw to be an egregious violation of our most fundamental right, which is no one can penetrate you, right? This is your body without consent as a violation. And so the system of governance that was deployed over the past 5 years attempted to preempt the sovereign rights of all citizens and to completely negate our Constitution. So, this was an awakening for everybody. I think we're all even stronger today for having gone through this. And because of this incredible movement, which Make America Healthy Again is at the center of, we have a historic opportunity to really reinvoke these principles that, really people had to lay their lives down for this. And, so what we experienced may be symbolic, digital assassination, black ops, yes, lawfare, demonetization, defamation. It's really not anything close to what the founding fathers and mothers had to do to get this great country to break free from the crown and from tyranny. So what's happening here in the United States will affect all countries. We know that. And this fight is not over. The recent ruling with Biden versus Missouri is incredibly positive. The only difference here is, in our case, we have 6 plaintiffs here in the Middle District of Florida, is that we are making sure that there is injunctive and declarative relief for citizens like ourselves to have been targeted in this way. There's no conceivable world that you can live in where this is something we're going to let happen again. It's just, you can't have the state, which has a monopoly on violence, force your children to be injected with transgenic experiments in the fashion that has occurred. So the fight's not over. I know you know this, Tony, better than anyone. MAHA is still rallying the grassroots forces so that we can continue this incredible effort. So again, thank you so much for having us on. We would love for people to be involved in this fight, because it's not about us. Again, it's about the future of all children and all parents who care about those children, to be able to prevent what happened during the COVID era from happening again.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Yeah, and that's a great point, that this fight is not over. It's just getting started. And this is the kind of fight that never ends. You know, that in any time we're going to have to keep fighting these kinds of fights. So thanks so much for all that you've done, and for, laying yourself down, your own life down, and, really suffering to protect all of our rights. So great to have you on again.
Thanks so much.
Next up, we have Christine Northrup, and she is a board-certified OB-GYN and one of the Disinformation Dozen. She's a visionary pioneer in health and is a New York Times best-selling author of Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, and the Wisdom of Menopause. She's the leading authority on everything that can go right with the female body, and we're so proud to have her on the show.
Thank you, Tony. The name is Christiane, actually, or Christian, like the religion. And I was going along, not saying anything different than I'd ever said in my career for 40 years. I had been on Oprah 10 times, did 8 highly successful public television specials, was named one of Reader's Digest's most trusted people in America. And what changed? Nothing changed with me. Everything changed with the powers that be. I was talking to someone yesterday, and they said 9/11 brought us together, and it did. That's the first time I enjoyed going to New York City. And so the powers that be had to decide on something that would divide us. And nothing has been ever more successful than the COVID thing, because I lost my publishers, my email people, my marketing arms, all of that, simply because I told the truth, and I was compelled to save lives when it mattered. First of all, by teaching people, this is not what you think it is. There are ways to protect yourself. And Dr. Zelenko had a protocol. I got that out there as soon as I could in April of 2020. Everything that was working to keep people safe, we were talking about. I couldn't even post Russell Blaylock's information about masks. This is when I found out Facebook had all of these censors. I'd never seen anything like it, and I actually couldn't believe it, because I had spent 40 years being able to get my message out. And my message always included the fact that vaccines are neither 100% safe nor 100% effective. Why was this one any different? So starting in March of 2020, when they began to lock us down, I knew that solitary confinement is not even allowed in prisons to the extent that you could lock down the entire population. I knew people in New York City who never hugged another person for 6 months. And so what I did, starting December of 2020, I thought, what is the most health-oriented thing I could do? And I had people come over to the house, and we started a little group called Maine Stands Up. We were inspired by Pam Popper in Ohio, Make Americans Free Again, her MAHA movement. And what we did is we got together to sue our governor about what cycle threshold was she using to lock down the state, knowing full well that everyone was using a cycle threshold of 40. And so that didn't go very far, because we began to learn about the lawfare. When I was named one of the Disinformation Dozen, someone just sent me the thing, and I laughed. I couldn't believe that this was actually happening. Since then, I've lost PayPal, I've lost Venmo, and have had to rebuild what was a very nice career, have to rebuild it almost from starting from scratch. So This has been a very big deal. On the other hand, when you are tried in the crucible, you become stronger. And I have, my faith has grown dramatically. I have learned that there are forces that are not really even human that are behind a lot of this. And as a result, we go forward. As Sayer said, we're not done. We are still shadow banned all over the place. And if we're shadow banned, you can imagine everyone else is too. But I trust in God and know that this is going to end okay. And like Sayer, and like all of us, it's interesting, when the Disinformation Dozen thing happened, most of us doubled down. I mean, we just went out there, and on my own dime, I went and spoke everywhere and never got paid, and just knew that I had to get the message out when we could save the most people. And that's exactly what we did. Would I do it again? You bet. You bet.
Thanks so much. And, that's a strong point that, when you try to shut down someone who's a real fighter, who's really strong and tough like you, it just makes that person stronger, makes them want to fight harder, makes them want to get the truth out even more. So that's where this all backfired, that so many people who might have even sat on the sidelines, just said, this is enough. This has gone too far, and I'm just not going to take it. So thank you so much for the work you've done, for the fighting you've done. And I hope that we can help, find ways to get you re-platformed so that you can, like Sayer's doing, and like all of the people on this show, can keep rising up and getting the power and the strength more so than you ever had, because you deserve it more than anybody. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Dr. Ben Tapper. He's a chiropractor and, of course, one of the Disinformation Dozen. He's the host of the Dr. Ben Tapper's podcast, which goes against the grain, of course, and talks about all the things that modern medicine is trying to hide from you. He is also the father of 5 children, and has just been an incredible fighter, like all of the people who are on this show today. So thanks so much for joining us, Ben.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to be able to just keep at the microphone here and shining light on this whole corruption and tyranny. I got into this fight. I've been in the natural health field all my life. I grew up in a chiropractic household, and my real passion is for healthy children. I want people to be healthy. That's why I got into this fight. That's what brought me here. I believe that we are in a massive crisis in our healthcare system. I mean, you mentioned earlier that our children are suffering. I mean, we have more neurological developmental disorders, delays, demyelination, degeneration than ever before, and chronic illness is at an all-time high. Unless we shift the paradigm here away from this sick model, we're never going to have change. And that's really where my convictions lie, and that's where my why is for our children to be healthy, and that's how I got into this fight. And I realized how much corruption there really is around the whole vaccine topic. I was never vaccinated. My children are not vaccinated, and we're healthy as can be. We get the question all the time: how are your children so healthy? And, we really have to shift the paradigm. I believe that God made our body to be well, to self-heal and self-regulate. I always use the illustration as a wilted plant. If you have a wilted plant, a lot of these doctors, they want to medicate or vaccinate the plant, or they want to cut off the leaves. And, if we give the plant water, it can be well. In other words, our body is no different. I firmly believe that, our body's ability to heal is far greater than our government and Fauci and Bill Gates has permitted us to believe. And so that's really where my conviction lies. And, Martin Luther King Jr. said that the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy. I spoke out in a big way, just like my colleagues here, because we all had the conviction that's greater than our complacency, conviction that's greater than our fear of persecution. And Thomas Jefferson said, one man with courage is a majority. Well, we are fighting tooth and nail. And if anything, if people listening here understood one thing, is that the soil for truth is rich right now, and the people are starving for it. And the soil for true health is rich. This is where we need to take the reins of this healthcare system and really be at the forefront of healthcare, because the people are starving for it. And and chronic illness is at an all-time high, but this means that we need to have true healers come to the forefront and speak truth to the matter here. Yes, the government can label us, and that's a slippery slope. They labeled us Disinformation Dozen. And what does that mean if you zoom out at a 30,000 sky foot view? When a government can label your voice, then they can control it. And freedom of speech was never there to protect the popular voice. It was there to protect dangerous voices. Okay, so if you want to label it whatever you want, that doesn't mean that you can censor. Censorship is the tool of the tyrant when the lie loses its power. We must protect freedom of speech at all costs. That's why we're fighting against this with everything we have. We're taking it to the courts. And so we're trying to do the best we can at fighting back. But again, the good thing about this whole thing is that more people are talking about vaccines than ever before. More people are waking up to this whole tyranny and this broken healthcare system that we live in. And I firmly believe there will be good that will come out of it. So very thankful to be here. Thankful to be speaking on your show here today. So thank you again for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Thanks for coming on. And, it's a great point that the last speaker, Christiane, said that, she was still shadow banned. And, one thing that all the people watching should do, and then that I hope that they will do, is to amplify all of the Disinformation Dozen and really work to help them rebuild their platforms, make them bigger and stronger than they ever were before, so that people who censored and deplatformed don't feel that they've won anything, that they see that the outcome is that they totally lose and that we rise again. So, you've been dangerous. All of the people who are part of the Disinformation Dozen, they are dangerous people, but you're a danger to a corrupt system that was intent on poisoning the American public. So thanks so much for being that kind of dangerous person.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Next up, we have Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. Next up, we have Rizza Islam. Sorry about that. And the best-selling author and researcher, a youth leader and business person with over 25 years of community service. Rizza has been consistently vocal on social media and on political questions, earning a reputation for speaking out against injustice, government corruption, health freedom, and much, much more. This is how he landed on the Disinformation Dozen list that, as I'm going to keep on saying, is a great honor. And he's now the founder and CEO of Intellectual Power as well as Peace Pads. Thanks so much for coming on, Rizza.
Truly honored and thankful to be here. I thank everyone for not only your participation, but your unwavering loyalty to fighting against evil and wickedness, really, because the people are rising up in a beautiful way. And I see, as Dr. Ben Tapper said, again, more and more are having these conversations that at one point would make you look totally crazy. But it is now the norm to speak about things like we are doing today. So the first thing I'll say is, with over 25 years of community service and work in the community, primarily the Black community and the community at large, questioning is something that is natural. And one big thing that I continue to look at was 10th grade biology taught us that the immune system is something that was given to us by God. You have the innate immune system. You have that natural thing that you were given to protect you from external forces, external pathogens, etc. But when they started to attack natural immunity, that caught my attention, number one. Number two, when they started to tell people, don't question. As a matter of fact, you're insane for questioning. Why don't you just trust the government and take what they offer you? They literally were saying this on national television. Of course, as a Black man in America, I don't trust that ever, never have, never will. And then, of course, when they started to tell the people, well, listen, seeing how all of you have these different issues, maybe it will be a good thing for you to get your friends to take it. And if your friends question, just tell them they should take it. Then they started to come around and use rap songs. Then they started to promote incentives. They started to give people discounts off of food. They started to tell people, hell, we'll give you free weed. We'll give you bikes. We'll give you money. I mean, it was so disgusting. as to how they promoted this to where I couldn't sit by and allow it to happen. So I started to research the recoveries when they were pushing the deaths. I started to research all of the naturopathic remedies, seeing how my mother was a naturopathic doctor. I was never vaccinated, and most of my family wasn't either. So none of this made sense whatsoever. And the biggest thing that I looked at is the fact that in 2015, Bobby Kennedy was brought to me regarding the MMR shot as it pertains to what was occurring and what is still occurring with Black boys as it pertains to data that came out of the CDC from the data where they said that 236% were leaning onto the autism spectrum at that rate who took the MMR on time versus those who waited after a certain point in comparison to young white boys. And that was data that was brought to me by Bobby Kennedy because no one listened to him in the Black community. So this has been a long-standing thing as it pertains to questioning and bringing out information. But when it came to the Disinformation Dozen, when they brought my name out, that's when I said, we're on the right track. We have to be on the right track because you don't get mentioned by the US government unless you're doing something completely good or completely bad. And at this point, people started to rise up in such numbers as they should have, because we realize we are all being targeted now, Black, white, and everyone all in between, Republican, Democrat, etc. So the beauty is I see more people questioning. I see more people coming up with solutions. And I'm truly thankful to know that we are not alone. And there are more people fighting now for health freedom, for the truth, for solutions than ever before. And if we do not continue to push this and expose the targeting of the First Amendment, which is the freedom of religion, speech, press, petition, and assembly, then this will be something that is going to become a norm for everyone in this country, where we will not be able to speak about the truth. We won't even be able to discuss it privately. And that's something that I don't think we want to fall into. So we have to continue to fight for this thing that we call the First Amendment and more. And God willing, we will be successful. I'll leave it with this. Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin said that fighting against tyrants is obedience to God. And I paraphrase that, but that is what we are doing. And we are fighting against tyrants, and God willing, will be successful.
Thanks so much. And, it's a key point that, we can speak the truth. We can speak out because of people like you, and trusting authority, like Bobby Kennedy says many, many times, is what's supposed to happen in a fascist country, not in this country, where we're not supposed to trust the government. We're supposed to hold their feet to the fire. We're supposed to question everything. And, you've questioned so much, and you doing it then becomes a beacon of light to millions and millions of other people. So you, as part of the Disinformation Dozen, were part of a group that I think led to millions and millions of people changing their minds and rising up. So thanks for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
So next up is Dr. Sherri Tenpenny, and she is an osteopathic medical doctor certified in integrative medicine. And, once again, one of the Disinformation Dozen. She was previously board certified in emergency medicine when she served as director of a level 2 trauma center and a full-time EMS physician. Her most recent book is Zero Accountability in a Failed System: How Big Pharma Weaponizes Vaccines, Public Health, and the Law. She's also the host of the Tenpenny Files podcast. Thanks so much for coming on, and great to have you with us.
Well, thanks so much, Tony. It's a pleasure being here. It's a pleasure talking to this really great group. And it's really a pleasure to be here with all of my colleagues, all named as the Disinformation Dozen. I was asked earlier today, what was I doing that made the government so mad that they had to put me into this corral of the Disinformation Dozen? I said, I don't know. I've been doing the same thing that I've been doing for going on 26 years now, educating people on the problems associated with vaccines, that they're not safe, they're not effective, They are not necessary, and they definitely cause harm. And I haven't veered from that in the 25 years that I've been talking about it. So I think they've been mad at me for a long time. And it just so happened that when I started talking about the COVID jab and telling people the truth about the ingredients that we knew about, the fact that the federal government had violated 2 of the 3 reasons at the FDA, there were 3 reasons that you could release something under an EUA. They violated 2 of those things, which means they broke the law twice to release it and to release it as an experimental product with no long-term studies and no efficacy done. All of the stuff that they did with the lockdowns, the myth of the mask, the fraud of the PCR testing, the absolute nonsense of the social distancing, and then all the people that have been injured and have died from the COVID jabs. That people are now, and the death rate really hasn't slowed down a whole lot because it's transferred from an acute death that happened within 72 hours after someone died to chronic long-term death, to where people are still dying suddenly from blood clots, myocarditis, renal failure, and all the things that were the long-term consequences of the COVID shot. And I just talked about it. And I think that, being deplatformed from all of my, all the work that we had done or I had done and all the rest of them have done on all the social media platforms, including PayPal, which I'm still banned from. And the reason that was a big deal is that was the method that I used to pay my employees that were all across the country and two of whom live in Canada. So that became a real problem. They deplatformed me from Podbeam on the very day I got an autoresponder email that said, "Congratulations, you just reached 1 million downloads on your podcast." And so there was no appealing to anybody. They just wiped the account and it was gone. And we're still heavily censored. We're shadow banned on X. I'm still just not allowed to be on Facebook. I have secondary accounts on Instagram that are set up through my team and my staff. I'm still permanently banned from PayPal. We're shadow banned on our emails. So this is an ongoing problem. And that's exactly why this lawsuit is in place, to be able to stand up against the government who colluded with big tech to do all this censorship. And this lawsuit that we're going forward with isn't just about us. In fact, it's barely about us. We are representatives for the rest of the American population that we don't want this to happen again to them. And we want to be able to take a stand and say the government and big tech cannot collude against American citizens to censor their free speech and to get out information that could save lives, and which they did. And so we're all here to represent the Disinformation Dozen from the things that happened to us, the things we were trying to get out, and the things we want to never, ever allow to happen again in this country.
Thanks so much, Sherri. And, great points. MAHA is always going to be for open dialogue and debate. And, we all know that for years, if you question the safety of a vaccine, you got deplatformed point blank. That was it. You were just taken down. And real science requires that everything be on the table, that we have to be able to talk about everything and hear all the different points of view. That's how we get closer to the truth. That's how we get real progress. And so, anytime you have things shut down in this country, you recognize that it's corporate corrupt science trying to overcome real science. So thank you so much for all the fighting you've done and for standing up to, some of the most powerful people on the planet, which is, real bravery. And you and so many of the other people on this show today, have been just incredibly brave. So thank you for everything you've done.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Next up, we have a very brave senator and a fighter for free speech, medical freedom, and real science. Science that serves the public, not corrupt corporate science. He's been a strong backer of the MAHA movement and its goals and its principles. And he's the author of an incredible book called Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up. Thanks so much and welcome, Senator Rand Paul.
Thanks, Tony. Good to be with everybody. As most of you know, I'm on the HELP committee, and we have before us MAHA advocate Casey Means' nomination to be Surgeon General. It's being held up, though, at the committee. It should have been out. We should have voted long ago. I would urge all MAHA supporters to write and call Chairman Bill Cassidy, Senator Susan Collins, and Senator Susan Murkowski, all of whom who do not currently or have not been vocal in their support for her nomination. I would make these phone calls polite. I would make the emails polite. We don't get any benefit if they're angry, or if you make the people angry you're trying to persuade. So do it in a nice way, but try to encourage them to vote for Casey Means. Casey Means' nomination is stalled really due to what they consider to be her great offense, advocating for vaccinations based on informed consent with your healthcare provider. For holding this simple thought crime, the public health establishment has engaged in character assassination to tank her nomination. They've accused her of being unqualified for the role simply because she is not a practicing physician, even though she has a medical degree from Stanford Medical School and was accepted into an extremely competitive surgical residency. Casey Means dares to say the foundation of our healthcare system is not to help people get healthy, that currently our system is spending trillions of dollars maintaining people's chronic illnesses without any sense of personal responsibility. I believe that most Americans' health problems would be drastically reduced if they listened to her non-controversial health advice about getting good sleep, eating real food, exercising, and viewing healthcare providers as sources of insight, not unquestioning dogma. If her nomination can't get the support it needs, then members who oppose her should at least be on record as opposing her. The Help Committee should call the question and make senators vote on Casey Means' nomination as soon as possible. If her nomination fails, we risk having another Surgeon General who simply regurgitates whatever the currently acceptable view of the medical elites is. President Trump, Secretary Kennedy, and the American people deserve better. I call for a vote as soon as possible.
Thanks so much, Rand. And, let me just say once again that, Casey Means wants, kids, all of us, to eat real food, to eat less ultra-processed food. She's a real truth teller. She's a fighter. She's going to stand up to the status quo that has failed the American public. And that's exactly the type of person who we need. So thanks for coming on and telling people once again that they should call Murkowski, Collins, Cassidy, and get them to recognize that there are consequences for backing big corporate corruption against what's obviously healthy for the public. So thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, Tony.
Next up, we have Erin Elizabeth. She's a longtime activist and health journalist and one of the Disinformation Dozen. Her site, healthnutnews.com, which she founded in 2015, cracked the top natural health sites within the first year, when it came out. And today she continues to teach millions things that they really need to know, but things that, like all of the other people on this show today, are dangerous to the corruption, to the deceit, and to the greed of a very small number of large corporations and corrupt people. So thanks for the work you've done, Erin, and thanks for coming on today. Can't hear you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Tony. And I get to follow up Dr. Rand Paul, who's kind of one of my heroes along with his father, but we're going to do this. So sorry about the mute. It's an honor to be here with all these great people. A lot of my heroes here today many of whom have been through a lot of this same stuff with me. And my story is a little different. I'll be quick, but I know some people, some of the Disinformation Dozen that I'm in have explained they never were vaccinated. And I lived in an orphanage for a while after my birth mother had a very bad pregnancy, to say the least. And then I had encephalitis, which is on record and recorded from the DPT. And that inspired my uncle, who was also my godfather, to start the Health Freedom Law Center in Florida in Southwest Florida in the late 70s, early 80s, on the front of Vegetarian Times. He was on, Phil Donahue, all these shows, because he saw how I almost died from the shots. The priest was called, the whole 9 yards. So But then my parents still felt it necessary to do all the vaccines because my uncle and his brother, my father, strongly disagreed on that. So, but it's difficult because I have part of my family that is very like-minded like me, but then the other half of my family, I'd say, who believe that I'm doing the devil's work or something by not promoting the COVID shot. There are still family members of mine getting booster shots, which is really sad. A couple of whom have gotten very sick, had cancer, or even one who has Parkinson's and is barely surviving. So I would say it was very difficult, but I know I'm not alone because I lost millions of followers per platform, just millions on Facebook, hundreds of thousands on Instagram. Even my URL was banned on Alameda, and I was banned on every platform, TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest, every single major social media platform. So I do have X back, Twitter, thanks to Elon Musk. So I'm very grateful. And I know that we, like a couple people have said, Dr. Tenpenny and I think Dr. Northrup, that we are still shadow banned even on the platforms that we do have. So that needs to change. And I know we are not alone. I hope that we can set a precedent for all these people who are still so censored or who haven't gotten their platforms back yet, because there are so many who are maybe didn't have as big of a followings as we do and weren't named in this crazy Disinformation Dozen, who never got their platforms back, and they deserve that back because we are really more than 12. So I think that's important, and I'm grateful to you and to Children's Health Defense, and to everyone who's bringing attention to this. Because as I just said in another earlier interview today, some people went out and initially I built those platforms back up, but MAHA especially just took them right back down. I build up tens of thousands again, maybe even hit nearly six figures on one, and they just cut you right back down and ban you again. And so it can be really frustrating. And I know some people here said that they went out and did every speaking event they could do. And for me, I'm very open about the fact that I, for the first time in my life, kind of went into a deep depression because I felt like my canvas was taken away. Or my paper as an author and a writer, but also the canvas. And then I feel like they not only ripped our canvas away, but then locked the museum. So we couldn't speak. We didn't have a voice. And that's what the hardest part was. So I'm so grateful for the kind words you've said today, and that we can win this lawsuit, and that we can set a precedent for everyone, because we deserve it, for our voices to be heard and never, ever to be silenced again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And those are just great words, great sentiments. And, we would really like to take part in helping to re-platform all of you. And, one of the things that I'd like to do is set up a space on our website, mahaaction.com, that is just for the Disinformation Dozen, for people who follow us, who want to be able to click through and follow you. Because, you guys took so many hits, you suffered so much. And like I said before, that was to protect all of our freedom. So we're all just really grateful. And, I really want all of us, all the people watching this show, to recognize the work that you've done and that all of the others have done, and follow you and help you, and, have you be more powerful than you ever were. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Gary Brecka. He is the visionary founder of The Ultimate Human. He's a world famous human biologist, a biohacker, a longevity expert, and he travels the world, helping teach people how to live healthier lives full of vitality. And he's been one of the toughest MAHA champions, and we're so grateful for everything that he's done, all the posts that he makes, all the help that he gives people, all the re-platforming of so many different people that I've seen him do on his platform. So thanks so much, Gary. Thanks for coming on again, and thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you so much for having me, Tony. I feel a little bit left out of the dirty dozen. So if it ever becomes a baker's dozen and you have room for one more, I'd like to be the 13th egg in the batch, if you don't mind. I've experienced everything that your guests have been talking about, till just now. Just for giggles, I went to my Instagram account. I've got close to 3 million followers, and I just looked at my last myriad of guideline violations. See how your community goes against our community guidelines, goes against our community guidelines, goes against community guidelines. Thankfully, by the grace of God, I have a platform that's very broad. So YouTube, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, they make a lot of money from my platform, but I do get deplatformed, and I am currently shadow banned for a number of things. One of which, oddly enough, if you actually were to open some of these and look at the content guidelines, the community guidelines that I was shadow banned for. One of these was that, Health and Human Services on the website posted the CDC child immunization schedule recommendation changes. And these were changes to immunization recommendations for children, to high risk groups, and others that were categorized into a category where you should have shared clinical decision making. And this is something that is right on the Health and Human Services website. You can see it on the CDC website. I noted that I was elated about these updates to the immunization schedule. At no point did I say people shouldn't get vaccinated or vaccines will kill you, but that the government is taking progressive steps and put a link to the CDC website. Sometimes, for giggles, I won't even do a post or a narrative. I will simply put a link to a certain section of the CDC's website, and I will put no commentary at all, and that will get flagged as disinformation. The absolute epitome of the suppression of free speech. I also, I'm not a physician, and I have all the respect in the world for people that are licensed to practice medicine. I'm not qualified to give medical advice. I don't give medical advice, but no more than you need to be an editor to read a newspaper. You don't need to be a physician to read clinical data, and to summarize clinical data and to popularize somebody else's work, especially when it's conducted at the highest gold standard of research, which would be these peer-reviewed, double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized clinical trials. And, as data was emerging, for example, on Alzheimer's, being linked to type 3 diabetes, elevated prolonged blood sugar, this correlated very much with the data that I saw in the mortality space. In 20 years in mortality research, we didn't see a single early onset demented patient or Alzheimer's patient that hadn't had 20 years of elevated blood sugar prior to. Now, I couldn't prove that was causal, but it was certainly correlated. And now the emergence that, Alzheimer's could be type 3 diabetes, that neurofibrillary tangles and amyloid plaques are not the cause of Alzheimer's, the byproduct of Alzheimer's, and that people are not losing their memory, they're losing access to their memory. This is emerging in more and more clinical data is becoming available. But as I popularize that, and very often it's the reason why I get deplatformed. So I'm a huge proponent of the First Amendment and free speech. I feel awful for what has happened to my colleagues, but I think that the tide is turning. We crossed more than 200 million independent views on our platform last month, and these are likes, shares, forwards, comments, downloads, and it just shows that the greatest shift in human interest in recorded history is underway right now. And it is people that are concerned about longevity, anti-aging, wellness. Citizen scientists are taking their decisions into their own hands. And I hope soon that not all of you will not just be vindicated, but you will be exalted and held to the standard, that you deserve to be held to, and that your platforms will come back. And if there's anything I can do to help make that happen, reach out to my team. Sherri, I need to speak to you as well about coming back on the podcast. Thank you so much. I'll yield back the rest of my time.
Thanks so much, Gary. And, we are really going to fight hard to help all of the Disinformation Dozen, get their platforms back and get stronger and stronger. And, your point that, it's sort of misinformation has really come to mean real information that's helpful, that's real science, but that's dangerous to corporations that exploit the public to make money by poisoning them. And so, people like you have really shown that there's a hunger in the public after COVID, more than there ever was before, that more than 100 million people, maybe 200 million people are really just sick and tired of being lied to. And they're searching desperately for places to get information that's real, that they can use as a building block to improve their health and to lead, better, happier lives. So thanks so much for getting those 200 million views, because that's stuff that really has to get out there.
Thank you so much, Tony.
Next up, we have Stuart Brotman. He's a leading public scholar on free expression, and he's just published an important book titled Free Expression Under Fire. We all know about that. This is a really important book. He served in 4 presidential administrations under both Republican and Democratic presidents. He's a digital media laureate at the Media Institute and a former visiting professor at Harvard Law School. He's reached millions and millions of viewers worldwide, and we want to even amplify that. So thank you so much, Stuart, for coming on the show, and thanks for writing the terrific book and for all the work you do.
Thanks so much, Tony. It's great to be here, and I've really appreciated all of the comments that I've heard so far. I want to actually give a new nickname for the group. You are free expression warriors. And I think you are clearly not only speaking out, but I think obviously you are in a battle here. And I think you should think of yourself not just as being the Disinformation Dozen, but also as being free expression warriors. We talk a lot about patriotism, but I think a fundamental aspect of patriotism are people who will step forward and defend free expression. And that's who you are as well. So I commend you for speaking out, but certainly want you to speak out proudly and perhaps use that label of being a free expression warrior as well as being a member of the Disinformation Dozen. Want to just spend a couple of minutes talking about what I call kitchen table conversations. So we all know what kitchen table conversations are. That's when the family gets together. It may be the immediate family. It may be the extended family. And we talk about real things that are happening in our lives and things that affect our lives. And so kitchen table conversations obviously have been organized around the economy. Are we going to be able to afford groceries or rent or the quality of life that we want to sustain? Kitchen table conversations are around education. What level of training do we want to be able to have? What can we provide for our kids? And of course, the third critical kitchen table conversation that we all have is around health. And now I think it's fundamentally important to bring free expression into the kitchen table conversation. So few of us actually sit around with our families and talk about free expression. And free expression has a direct link to some of these other conversations, because if we can't speak openly about health issues, for example, we may not be able to make the decisions that we're talking about around the kitchen table. So I think it's important as a cultural, but particularly as a matter of our families, to be able to talk about how we express these ideas and to do it at a very intimate level, which is obviously not just on social media, not just through a number of platforms, but be able to bring it down to a very personal level to the people that we support, that we love and care for. So think about kitchen table conversations and how you, as free speech warriors and getting other free speech or free expression warriors, to begin these kitchen table conversations. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Stuart, and thanks for renaming us free expression warriors. And, clearly it's true that you can't have, real kitchen table conversations, that you can't have real freedom if you don't have real dialogue and if you don't have access to information. And that means hearing things that you disagree with, that you can talk about and wrestle with. So not just getting some kind of truth from a third party and then regurgitating it, but really getting the building blocks of ideas. And that can happen at the kitchen table. It can happen anywhere. So thanks so much for writing the book, for coming on the show, and for all the work that you've done for many, many years.
Thank you, Tony.
Next up, we have Dr. Eric Berg, and he's known as the Knowledge Doctor, and he's earned that title from being a globally recognized health educator with over 45 million followers all around the world. And for more than 3 decades, he's helped people comprehend how the body works and, help develop practical strategies to have better, healthier lives. So he's an incredible thinker and a writer and a researcher and a great friend to the MAHA movement. So thanks for coming on once again.
Thank you so much, Tony. I really appreciate it. I didn't make the Dirty Dozen list, but I did make one of the top super spreaders of misinformation, which is pretty wild because that whole thing has been completely inverted. Here are these people trying to help people, and then they twist it to being hurting people, which is completely, accusing other people of what they're doing. It's really, really terrible. But I built up one of a very large health channel on YouTube over 17 years. And about, I think the date was August 2023, YouTube announced their medical misinformation framework. And what's bizarre to me is just that definition of misinformation, which is basically anything that contradicts established medical viewpoint from the World Health Organization and also local health authorities. So if that happens, you're going to be suppressed, you're going to be banned. What happened to me was I went from literally about 400,000 subscribers a month down to 50,000 subscribers like overnight, just bam, just went down. And so they restricted, alternative cancer treatment discussions. We couldn't talk about that. I had to take all my cancer videos off and put them on other platforms. And it was pretty crazy. You couldn't talk about vitamin C in relationship to radiation for cancer. I mean, that was a violation. You couldn't talk about colloidal silver. You still can't talk about it. I mean, that's one of the main natural antibiotics that medicine used for a very long time. But then now all of a sudden it's folklore medicine. You can't talk about it. So I had to take a lot of my content down. And so what they did is they replaced, they put all these other sites ahead of whoever was there. So if you had an institution like Johns Hopkins or the Mayo Clinic, you got a special blue health source label. So all independent creators were pushed down by this algorithm. And what's interesting about that, my views actually did not go down too much. And I think the reason is because their plan didn't really work. People don't want that information from Hopkins or Harvard on health because it's just so general. It's so same old information. And this is why they even had to shut off their comments because they were getting so many negative comments. So they didn't really get a lot of views. So, but they tried to suppress it. And unfortunately, a lot of people got their voices suppressed. I'm a chiropractor, and chiropractors don't get the blue label. But if you're a medical doctor, you can, but you have to submit to it, and just to make sure that you're in agreement with all the things that medicine agrees on, and you have to, walk the party line on that. But that YouTube paid the National Academy of Medicine $100,000 to write the criteria. Of course, hospitals were automatically included. Doctors had to apply, like I said. But even worse, the institutional channels, they basically got no pushback. They could pretty much say whatever they want and do whatever they want. But if you follow the money, YouTube is owned by Google, and Google is owned by Alphabet. Alphabet is one of the world's largest investors in pharmaceutical and biotech companies. The venture arm called GM manages over $13 billion in assets. And Alphabet owns Verily Life Sciences, which also partners with Pfizer and Novartis. So the companies that are deciding health information are heavily invested in big pharma. That's really what was going on. And, the standard credibility is whether you agree with these institutions or not. So basically it boils down to whether you agree with big pharma, unfortunately. So that's a business model, and it's really based on the complete lie of this definition of misinformation, which they distorted it. And so again, it's all about these definitions. But the good news is things are moving away from the Google searches, and they're going more to AI. People are using AI, and they follow a completely different rule system. They're not doing the same thing as Google. So you get more correct information on basic lifestyle changes, keto, fasting, nutrition. You get stuff that's related to the true science of that. So that's a good thing. They don't slap a warning label on it. So these are all great things. So people are bypassing Google and going straight to AI. So I think the future is going to be better in that area. So YouTube thing is cracking, and I think people are going to go away from that because it's not working. It's not helping people. So the good news is MAHA is definitely fighting back. Freedom of health information is freedom of speech. And that's why I'm on the side of MAHA. So thank you very much, Tony.
Thanks so much, Eric. And, clearly it has been all about making money, not about public health. And, that's why people all around the country, they no longer want Harvard or the New York Times or Google information, because that's the status quo. And the blue label got us here. It made us all sick. And they've had enough of that. They've had enough of being lied to and of being put in a situation where their health is not the priority. And so it's people like you, it's people like all the people who've been on this show today who really want to help us all get the information necessary to lead healthier lives. So thanks for all the incredible work you're doing, and thanks for all the help that you give to me, to the MAHA movement, and to all of us.
Absolutely.
Next up, we have Mary Holland, and she has been, running a practically perfect nonprofit called Children's Health Defense that was founded by Secretary Kennedy. She's a prolific author, a former law professor at NYU, and she's been fighting for children, for protecting children for over 2 decades. And, she's been suing people who need to be sued, standing up, fighting, daily, all, just around the clock, day after day. And I'm just very proud to have gotten to know you, Mary, and to see and to be part of all the work that you've done. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Tony, thanks so much. I'm honored to be here with these true free expression warriors. And one thing that we know, and Bobby Kennedy knows so well, is that censorship is deadly. Censorship is really the tool of tyranny, as so many of your other people have said. And so Children's Health Defense has been at the forefront of fighting this. But like so many of the others here, we were deplatformed. When Bobby Kennedy was deplatformed before he ran for president, Children's Health Defense was deplatformed from YouTube, from Instagram, from Facebook, from TikTok, from Twitter. And we're not yet back on all those platforms. So I have a request for all the people here. Please go to our website, childrenshealthdefense.org. Sign up for Defender. Sign up for CHD TV. We're putting out great content. We're now on X, but we're still not back on Facebook and Instagram, although we're going to start fresh. We did take a case against Facebook and Meta platforms all the way to the Supreme Court. Sadly, that we didn't win on that, but we just got a settlement in Kennedy v. Biden, a case against the federal actors, and the Trump administration acknowledged that they had broken the law, and we got a settlement on that. And we're still fighting in a case with many people on this call called the Trusted News Initiatives. That case against corporate censorship and violations of antitrust is still going on. But I want to add that we've got, many people have made the point, these violations of our rights, of our First Amendment rights, are still ongoing. So we have a fantastic initiative called the COVID Justice Resolution. We want the Senate to pass a resolution that says they're not going to do again what they did during COVID. No science, no hearings, no input from the public, and doing things that were explicitly in violation of our Constitution. We look at it, it's right on our webpage, or go to to covidjustice.org. Let's make sure this never happens again. Let's make sure that everybody understands that emergencies don't suspend the Constitution. Last but not least, I want to talk about another really important area for us at Children's Health Defense, and that is protecting the public, but especially children, against wireless radiation. The government, unfortunately, has not put in place, the Federal Communications Commission has not put in place appropriate exposure standards for radiation. They're outdated. They're not based on all of the science. They're too high. There are 10,000 studies. We are so grateful that Bobby Kennedy at Health and Human Services has now started to focus on this issue of wireless radiation and has convened a group, a task force on this led by Tammy Huziga. It's an urgent public health issue. We have a lot of information on it on the Children's Health Defense website. We've got to stop the acceleration and this rollout of more and more wireless technology, antennas, towers everywhere, until the science is really clear and until there are appropriate health regulations and health limits put in place. So please join us at Children's Health Defense. We are so proud to stand with the Disinformation Dozen, the Free Expression Warriors, and we know that we're all on one team and we're all a part of making America healthy again. And most importantly, making children healthy again. That's our job. We're the grown-ups. They can't do this for themselves. It's our job to create a healthier future. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And it's it's critical to kind of think of us as all being on one team, even though we can disagree about all kinds of things. That's what free expression warriors do. And that's what makes us strong. And that's what makes us more scientific, because we can disagree, but still kind of love each other, still be on the same team, still be fighting the same mission. So thanks so much for, all the great fighting that you've done. It's always great to hear your voice. And, you made me think of this great old quote from Faulkner. And it is, "Never be afraid to raise your voice for honesty, truth, and compassion against the injustice and lying and greed." So, it's a great kind of point that I think needs to be said here with all of these great free expression warriors and all these great freedom fighters, that we are standing up to just incredibly powerful forces, and we're not backing down, and we're winning. And we've made it through such incredibly difficult times. And this is our moment. So thank you, Mary. Thanks for everything you've done.
Thanks, Tony.
Next up, we have Russell Brand. And Russell has been, fighting censorship and lies and propaganda, on his show for the last couple of years. And he's doing it in a poetic and convincing and charismatic way that really gets through to millions and millions of people. He does it in a way that really nobody else can do. So thank you so much, Russell. Great to have you on once again.
Thank you, Tony, for having me on. It's lovely to see Mary there. Thank you again for always introducing me so gallantly and elegantly. I was just watching a video of some people that have acquired some land and that are running a community independently as is possible anywhere these days, where the tendrils of the state and often unelected power, but even when it is elected, it seems to be elected, if not duplicitously, then dishonestly. What I mean to say is probably a lot of people right now feel some disappointment and some fatigue. It's difficult to remain optimistic in the institutions of power in your country that are supposed to hold together civic life. Is there anyone left that thinks that the judiciary is primarily interested in instituting justice? Are there any people left that imagine that wars are primarily undertaken in order to protect and preserve the way of life of ordinary Americans or ordinary Israelis or Iranians? It's a time of so much constrictive and corrupted power that what was once called quietism, isolationism, the idea of a kind of a monastic retreat, of acquiring some land, of growing your own food, of being in control of your own energy, a kind of a return to nature, seems so appealing. Tony, what I get from you is that you're very engaged in the fight, that you've made a personal commitment to remain engaged and to take up the slack that may be left when the first round of leaders, in some ways blessedly, entered into positions of real power and real influence, and we might speculate entered into a territory of necessary compromise, where suddenly you're not outside the tent, you're within that tent having different conversations. You know, when you did that MAHA event in DC, and I was there, and you know, there were people there from Walmart and Neuralink, and I recognize these are sort of like great big organizations and institutions that don't, just because of scale, need to be regarded cynically. Not every giant is Goliath. And even if they are, maybe that's a good thing, because, you know, Goliath can be overcome if you spend your whole life preparing for battles with giants. And maybe a lot of us feel that we have. Maybe a lot of us feel that we've been one way or another schooled by our lives, fashioned by our challenges. So I suppose what I feel like when I'm in this MAHA call right now with you is that there are so many brilliant people, you know, brilliant physicians, doctors, nutritionists, experts, people that understand how we have to treat our bodies, the kind of food that we should eat, things we should do to maximize our health, to optimize. But what I feel is that it's very difficult to optimize when you operate within the restrictive shadow and asphyxiating constraints of systems that precisely exist in order to impede growth, health, welfare, thriving, all about us. I see it and feel it now, like them crows above Tel Aviv, dark and circling. But I do feel that there are solutions too, but and I guess this is pivotal and highly relevant in this conversation, because this is the nexus and interstitial material between people that are in real power, Dr. Oz, Secretary Kennedy, the Means siblings, Casey and Callie. Are there any more Meanses? Are there any more? Is there a forgotten one in an attic somewhere? Is there a forgotten Means sibling that we could elevate to a position of nutritional authority? Drag them out. Have them smash the Coke vending machines with their naked fists if necessary. Because what I'm feeling is a new declaration of independence is required. A new declaration of independence, where finally the technology that's being used to surveil and control and monitor, that it seems to me is intended to centralize further, so that one day one world government can implement beneath the skin a single chip, so that nothing can be bought or sold, so that no currency can be exchanged without it being monitored, curtailed, controlled, constrained. It seems to me that that very technology could be used to create direct democracy. Do we really need some galloping gallivant on horseback heading to Westminster or DC to represent a community, when perhaps now we could represent ourselves and one another under God, grow our own food, treat one another, worship and love, and expect, anticipate and accept the grim finality of inevitable death that all of us know is coming. All of us know is coming. Let that be the marker. Let that be the horizon that we look towards, spending all of our time erecting false gods, occupying false temples, living within the institutions that we know bow down and worship Moloch, Baal, Baphomet, the necromancer, he who walks backwards, the follower of the left-hand path. Oh man, Tony, I need your optimism. I need your leadership, because I feel that what we need is revolution. Thankfully, we have revolutionary leaders here on this call. Thanks, you lot.
Yeah, thanks. And, that's the thing. We don't want to be told what to do, what to think, what to eat, what to read, how to worship. we want to be well informed. We want the information, but we want to make decisions by ourselves. And, when you talk about Casey Means, when I think of Casey Means, I think we're all Casey Means. She's fighting for us. She's fighting with us. She is us. And she will help us find our freedom, find our voice, find our health. We need people who are willing to stand up to these corrupt, greedy people and give us better outcomes. And all the people who came before, the Harvard, the Yale, the Princeton, the New York Times, all of these, Google, all these places, they failed the American public. They put us in the position we're in now, and we need change. And, Casey Means represents change. And so, once again, we are her, and we will fight for her. She will fight for us. And people should all call Senator Susan Collins, Senator Lisa Murkowski, Senator Bill Cassidy, and say, we're mad as hell at what's been going on, and we're not going to take it anymore. So thanks once again for coming on. It's always electrifying to hear you talk. So thank you for all of you for joining the MAHA Media Hub once again. Want to say quickly that that Jan Jekielek came on last week to talk about his book, Kill to Order. And, it's a really important book because it's about what goes on in China and the lack of medical freedom there and, the incredible crimes that are committed there. And it's a warning for all of us about what can happen and what we've been heading towards and what we at MAHA won't let us continue to head towards. So that book made number 8 on the New York Times bestseller list this week. And that's a fascinating thing because the Times doesn't always play by the rules. Many times, even if a book sells really well, they won't put it there. But it's a sign of how much power we're beginning to have, and that we have a loud voice, and it's an incredible voice, and it's and we have these powerful tools, and I'm going to say it every week. We have these powerful tools at our fingertips. We have something like 200,000 followers on Substack for the MAHA report. We have the MAHA Institute roundtables, that are really just fantastic. We have the MAHA Summit each November, and that's just going to get better and better. It was really great last year. We've got mahaaction.com, terrific website. We've got MAHA films, MAHA books, MAHA parties. We have a mailing list of 2 million MAHA warriors. But we're going to build that this year to 20 million MAHA warriors. And I think that can keep on growing because all of us want to lead healthier, happier lives. And we can do that if MAHA can make it easier and more affordable to be healthy in this country. So we're going to use every bit of power we have, and we're going to work with every branch of government, with cabinet members, with anybody who will work with us, with all the stakeholders, with everybody on every side, even people who've made big mistakes, even people who've come out and fought us time after time. We want to work with everybody. We want to have a positive outcome. So, following this call, you're going to get an email that's going to have clips from this show, and it's going to have calls to action. Please follow up. Please post things. We are a powerful movement, and if we stick together, even when we disagree, we can become more and more powerful. And then people will put us on their bestseller list. They will, not write as many hit pieces. They will recognize that we have more followers than they do, that we have a more powerful voice, and that voice is unstoppable. And they will want to change and to begin to navigate this new world that we're leading, not fighting them, that they're going to have to come to us and change their products, change their policies, stop deplatforming people, and recognize that the world won't accept it anymore. So please donate and send to to the Disinformation Dozen Give, Send, Go campaign. We will send links to that in the follow-up messages. And then also please sign the COVID Justice Resolution petition. And then, go to our website, follow our tracker, take action on the MAHA bills that we discuss there, subscribe to our Substack. And then, thank you for sticking with us for an hour and 20 minutes today. Thank you for all being MAHA warriors. And we will be in touch in the morning, and we will hopefully see you next week at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. Thanks so much and have a great night.
America's children are sick, and moms have been betrayed. The time for empty promises, long past. Now is a time for action. MAHA is the most powerful force of collective action in generations. The grassroots power of moms and activists has created an army of health warriors with more reach than all mainstream media combined. Together, we can end the chronic disease epidemic. MAHA's influence is reaching millions. It's reaching Congress. And that energy, these chain reactions, are working.
How about Operation Stork Speed?
Dozens of food companies removing toxic ingredients.
I plan to lead by example.
MAHA is now.
We're talking about how to change the culture.
The American people want America healthy again.
There's a renaissance moment in health in America.
For health, freedom, and the truth. Join us at MAHA Action.